Emily Carter and Hannah Moore had been planning the Alaska trip for months, talking about it in late night calls and scribbled notes between college applications. To them, the Tongass National Forest wasn't just a destination. It was freedom. Endless trees, untouched trails, and silence that felt pure. They documented everything, posting photos of misty mountains and narrow dirt paths, joking about how small they felt compared to the wilderness. Friends remembered Emily laughing about having 0 bars, but a full soul, while Hannah insisted the forest felt too quiet, like it was holding its breath. On the second evening, they hiked farther than originally planned, following an unmarked trail that didn't appear on their map. The sunlight filtered through the towering pines in strange angles, and the air grew noticeably colder. Emily mentioned hearing footsteps behind them, but every time they stopped, there was nothing. Only the slow sway of branches and the distant creak of trees rubbing together. Hannah's camera later revealed several blurred photos, each one showing a dark shape lingering just beyond the trail, always just out of focus. At 6:47 p.m., Emily sent the final text from her phone, her hands shaking as the signal briefly flickered to life. Something feels off out here. Moments later, Hannah tried calling her brother, but the call dropped after 2 seconds. The girls turned back toward their campsite, yet the forest no longer looked familiar. Trees seemed closer together, the path narrower, almost twisted. The GPS spun in circles, and the temperature continued to drop as daylight faded. Then, without warning, both phones went completely dead. By the next morning, Emily and Hannah were officially listed as missing, and the search began fast. State troopers, park rangers, and volunteer rescue teams flooded the Tongass National Forest, spreading out across miles of unforgiving terrain. Helicopters hovered low above the treetops, their blades slicing through thick fog, while search dogs pulled hard against their leashes, confused by scent trails that seemed to start, then abruptly vanish. Every hour that passed made the forest feel larger and more hostile, as if it were swallowing the searchers the same way it had swallowed the girls. 3 days into the operation, a volunteer spotted Emily's backpack near the edge of a fast-moving river. It was standing upright against a rock, untouched by water, its zippers neatly closed. Inside were snacks, a phone charger, and a folded map. Nothing torn, nothing missing. There were no footprints leading to it and none leading away. Investigators exchanged uneasy glances because it looked less like something lost and more like something placed. The dogs circled the area endlessly, whining, refusing to move forward as if the trail simply stopped existing. As weeks passed, the search expanded deeper into areas locals avoided. Teams reported malfunctioning radios, sudden drops in temperature, and the unsettling feeling of being watched. One ranger later admitted he heard a woman's voice calling his name from the trees, even though he knew no one was there. With no bodies, no evidence of an attack, and no clear direction to follow, resources began to run dry. After 6 weeks, officials quietly scaled back the operation, leaving behind ribbons on trees, unanswered questions, and a forest that refused to give anything back. 2 days after Emily and Hannah disappeared, the forest had already moved on. Summer had faded into early fall, and the Tongass was quieter, heavier, blanketed in damp leaves and constant gray mist. 2 experienced hikers, Mark Jensen and Lucas Reed, entered the area on a routine backcountry trek. Unaware they were walking through a place most locals refused to mention anymore. The trail was faint and uneven, But what caught their attention wasn't the difficulty. It was the unnatural silence. No birds, no insects, just the soft crunch of their boots and the low hum of wind moving through the trees. Several miles in, Mark noticed something ahead that didn't belong. Thin lines stretched between the trees, barely visible through the fog. At first, they thought it was old climbing rope left behind by hunters, but the closer they got, the more deliberate it looked. The ropes were tied in complex knots, weathered but strong, circling a massive pine tree that towered above the others. The ground around it was unnaturally clear, as if nothing had been allowed to grow there for a long time. When the fog shifted, the shapes became clearer, and both men froze. Two figures were standing upright against the tree, their bodies bound at the wrists and ankles, heads slumped forward. For a terrifying second, Mark thought they were mannequins or some kind of twisted warning. Then one of the figures moved, a shallow breath, a slight tremble. Panic took over as Lucas fumbled for his radio, his hands shaking so badly he nearly dropped it. Whatever they had stumbled upon wasn't just evidence of a crime. It was something the forest had been hiding, waiting to be found. Rescue teams arrived hours later, cutting through the ropes with knives as medics rushed forward. Emily and Hannah collapsed the moment they were freed, their bodies unable to support their own weight. Their skin was pale, stretched tight over visible bones, and their lips were cracked and bleeding. Both girls flinched violently at the sound of voices, reacting as if human speech itself had become a threat. When a medic tried to cover Emily with a thermal blanket, she screamed and tried to crawl back toward the tree, her fingers digging into the dirt as if she believed leaving it was dangerous. Closer examination revealed disturbing details. Their wrists and ankles were bruised in layers, old marks beneath newer ones, suggesting the bindings had been removed and reapplied many times. Dried blood-stained parts of the rope, yet there were no open wounds nearby. Stuffed deep into their mouths were pieces of cloth, damp and frayed, marked with symbols drawn in what appeared to be charcoal mixed with sap. The same symbols had been carved repeatedly into the bark of the pine tree, some fresh, others aged, forming a rough circle around where the girls had been standing. During the helicopter evacuation, neither girl spoke. Their eyes followed every movement, tracking shadows along the forest floor and the shifting shapes of the trees below. At the hospital, doctors confirmed something even more unsettling. Despite being missing for 3 months, signs of prolonged starvation didn't fully match the timeline. It was as if they had been fed, just enough to survive. Nurses later reported that both girls woke up screaming whenever the lights were turned off, whispering about footsteps, ropes tightening, and a voice that never came from the same direction twice. Police questioned Emily and Hannah separately, hoping distance might loosen their silence, but the result was the same: long pauses, shaking hands, eyes fixed on corners of the room as if someone else were standing there. Emily refused to answer most questions, responding only with nods or single words. Hannah was worse. She stared through the detectives, her breathing uneven, until she finally whispered that talking about it would make him notice again. Medical staff noted that both girls reacted violently to the sound of rope tightening, even something as simple as window blinds being pulled closed. Just before Hannah slipped into a coma, she grabbed a nurse's wrist with surprising strength and spoke 4 quiet words that were later written into the official report. He said the forest watches. She never explained who he was. Investigators searched the area again, this time focusing on the tree, but found no campsites, no footprints, and no DNA that didn't belong to the girls or the rescue teams. The symbols carved into the bark didn't match any known cult markings or indigenous signs. Strangely, some of the carvings appeared older than the tree itself, according to a forestry expert, something that made no logical sense. Within months, the case stalled. Files were marked incomplete. Evidence went missing. Officers involved were reassigned. Locals, however, didn't need reports to form their own conclusions. Hunters spoke of hearing soft instructions, whispered from nowhere. Hikers claimed ropes appeared overnight, hanging between trees and vanishing by morning. The pine tree where the girls were found was eventually cut down, but even now, people say the area feels wrong, like the forest remembers what happened there and remembers who walked away. And even today, no one knows who tied those ropes or why the girls were kept alive instead of killed. The forest never gave answers, only silence. Officials say the case is closed, but the Tongass still stands untouched watching. Hikers who pass through that region claim their GPS glitches, their radios whisper static, and sometimes they hear a voice telling them to stop, because whatever took Emily and Hannah was never caught. And if the forest truly watches, then it knows who's listening right now.
If you liked this video, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Most importantly, subscribe and hit the bell icon so the next secret finds you first.